The moment my father lifted his glass and said, "To my two successful kids," and the family embarrassment, something inside me went deathly still. The clink of silverware died down, laughter faltered, and every face at the table turned toward me, waiting to see how I'd react. What no one knew was that I'd already prepared for this. What he saw as a joke would soon become a turning point no one at that table would forget. I'm Amelia Morgan. I'm 34 years old, and I've spent my entire life trying to impress a man who never once looked me in the eye with pride. That night, I was done. And if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, hit that like button and subscribe. Because this story might give you the strength you didn't know you had. The setting was elegant, of course it was. My parents' 40th wedding anniversary dinner wasn't just a family gathering, it was a social display. Held in the ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel, all ivory linen and crystal chandeliers, it had the atmosphere of a corporate gala disguised as love. There were 70 guests, family, business partners, old friends, who existed purely for clout. And there I was, in a bottle green dress I'd bought with a consultant's paycheck, sitting next to a cousin I barely knew, 3 seats away from my father who hadn't spoken a word to me all evening. My brother Ethan, the chosen one, sat to his right, former college athlete, rising star in real estate, owner of a jawline that still got him magazine covers. And on the other side, my sister, Claire, the graceful one, Ivy League educated, married to a venture capitalist, 2 kids already enrolled in elite preschools, both of them golden in his eyes. I was the third, the quiet one, the one who, despite graduating top of her class, building a consultancy from scratch, and getting featured in Forbes Women, somehow never did anything worth celebrating. I had arrived with a peace offering, a new Jaguar wrapped in a crimson bow, parked in the front circle drive. From all 3 of us, I told the valet, though neither Ethan nor Claire had contributed a dime. I didn't do it to be praised, not entirely. I did it because I was tired. Tired of being invisible, tired of the aching silence that followed every one of my accomplishments. I thought maybe this gesture, this symbol of gratitude and success, would shift something. Instead, during the second course, beet tartare with microgreens, my father stood, his wine glass half full, his tone light and cutting as ever. "Let's raise a toast," he said. The room quieted. "To Claire and Ethan, my pride. They've made smart choices. They're building families. They're upholding the name." He paused. "And of course, to the family embarrassment," he added, looking directly at me with a tight smile. "Who sends me cards instead of wedding invitations?" Laughter rippled around the table, unsure and polite. Claire stared at her lap. Ethan chuckled. My hand tightened around my knife. What no one knew was that in my clutch, under the table, was a sealed manila folder. In it, DNA test results. A truth I had suspected for years. A reason, maybe the only one, why I never fit, never felt truly seen. I didn't say anything, not yet. I sipped my water and looked at him, not as a daughter, but as a woman assessing a man who had just signed his own downfall in red wine. The dinner moved on like nothing happened. Beef tenderloin was served. Waiters refilled glasses. My father dove into a story about Ethan's new investment in a tech startup. I sat in silence, my skin prickling under every glance from extended family who weren't sure if they should laugh again or look away. My mother, seated at the far end, met my eyes briefly. Her expression was unreadable, but I saw the fear there. Not for me, for what might happen if I finally broke the rules. After the third course, I excused myself. I didn't go to the restroom. I went to the hallway, took a breath, and opened the folder. The paper was creased at the edges, read a dozen times before tonight. The ink hadn't changed, still there, still undeniable. He wasn't my father, but he'd raised me like he was. Or rather, tolerated me, manipulated me, used silence as a weapon so often it became the soundtrack of my childhood. There were no birthday cards, no bedtime stories, only quarterly report cards and comments like, could have done better, even when I had a perfect GPA. I stood in that hallway remembering all of it. The time he skipped my graduation dinner for a golf trip. The time he said my first apartment in the city was cute for someone in your tax bracket. The way he always introduced me last, if at all. He wasn't just cruel, he was calculated. And now, for once, I had the calculation in my hands, something he hadn't prepared for. I smoothed my dress, tucked the folder under my arm, and walked back to the table. My heart was steady, my mind was razor sharp. I knew exactly what I was going to do. The shift in the air was immediate when I sat back down. Not everyone had noticed my absence, but those who had, mainly the people who watched others more than they spoke, sensed something different about me, my posture, my stillness. Something was coming, and though they couldn't name it, they could feel it. My father didn't notice at all. He was too busy holding court, telling another story about how he'd schooled the zoning board last week to get a downtown property approved for luxury condos. Ethan laughed a little too loud. Claire twirled her wine glass, eyes fixed on a spot on the tablecloth. I let it all happen. Let the performance unfold for a few more minutes. I needed the silence, not for drama, for clarity. Timing mattered. Then I heard the words that sealed it. You know, my father said, gesturing toward Ethan and Claire with his fork. Real legacy is when your kids reflect your values. That's how you know you've done something right. It wasn't even said with malice, just the cold, clinical confidence of a man who had made up his mind decades ago, and never questioned it since. I placed my napkin gently on the table, reached down, and took the folder from my bag. I didn't open it, not yet. I laid it beside my plate like a sealed detonator. Claire noticed first, her brow furrowed. Then Ethan. He went tense. My mother's eyes flicked to the folder and didn't leave it. She knew, I saw it in her face. Excuse me, I said quietly, and stood. Before dessert, I'd like to say something. Conversation stopped. Some plates clinked lightly as silverware was set down. Dozens of eyes turned to me, expecting, what? A toast? A rebuttal? Another peace offering? I didn't smile. I wasn't going to do this tonight. I really wasn't, I said, my voice steady. But I realize now there's no such thing as the right time in this family. There's just silence, and the things we let happen in it. My father leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised, amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. Amelia, if this is about earlier... It's not about earlier, I cut in, still calm. It's about always. I saw him shift, just slightly. He didn't like being interrupted, but he didn't stop me. Not yet. I've spent most of my life being told what I'm not, I continued. Not charming enough, not settled enough, not traditional enough. I've been called difficult, cold, rebellious. But I've never been called daughter, not in the way that mattered. Now the room was silent in that deep, alert way, like the moment before a storm hits. Last year, I took a genetic test, just out of curiosity, or maybe it was something else. Maybe I was looking for a reason why I always felt not quite in place. My mother gasped, soft and involuntary. My father's jaw tightened. He knew what was coming. He just hadn't expected it here. The results didn't align, I said. So I did another. This one, more official, more personal. I picked up the folder and held it in both hands. It felt warm, heavy. This contains the truth, I said, meeting my father's eyes. That Richard Morgan is not my biological father, gasps this time, audible. A knife dropped to a plate. Someone whispered, Jesus Christ. I'm not looking for shock. I'm not looking for pity. I'm looking for closure, I said, and placed the folder in the center of the table. You don't have to open it, but I won't pretend anymore. My father stared at the folder as if it were something toxic. He didn't touch it. He didn't speak. Ethan was the first to recover. What are you doing? He asked, voice low but sharp. Why now? Why here? Because, I said, turning to him, this family only listens when it's on display. In private, things get brushed under the rug, gaslighted, but not tonight. Claire looked pale. Her hand covered her mouth. She hadn't moved. My mother looked like she might faint. I don't know what story you've told yourself, Dad, I said, turning back to him. That I'm defiant for no reason, that I'm cold, that I'm incapable of fitting your mold. But the truth is, I never had a shot. Because I was never really yours, was I? His face didn't change. That was the worst part. Not rage, not confusion. Just a slow exhale, like someone resigning a chess match. You should have come to me, he said quietly, not ambushed us in front of guests. You don't get to talk about dignity now, I replied. Not after toasting me as the embarrassment in front of 70 people. He said nothing. The silence stretched. And then softly, my mother stood. She walked around the table and stopped beside me. Her face was ash white, but her voice didn't shake. I should have told you years ago, she said. I should have protected you. The admission hit me harder than I expected. I turned, stunned, and she looked at me with tears in her eyes. He wasn't supposed to raise you like this. He said he could love you. He said it wouldn't matter. I believed him. I swallowed hard. But it did matter, didn't it? She didn't answer. Her silence was enough. The rest of the room blurred. I didn't need their reactions. I didn't need their whispers. I just needed to finish. I came here tonight thinking I might still want a place at this table, I said. But now, I see I don't. I reached for my clutch, left the folder where it lay. For anyone wondering, I added, glancing at the guests, I built my career without this family. I made every decision without the benefit of this name. And I'm walking away tonight lighter than I've ever been. Then I turned and left, and no one tried to stop me. Outside the ballroom, the night air felt like freedom. The automatic hotel doors parted with a soft whoosh as I stepped into the parking lot, heels clicking over the concrete. My heart wasn't racing anymore. The storm had already passed. What remained was clarity, sharp, cold, and final. I didn't cry. Not when the valet handed me the keys to the car. Not when I slid into the driver's seat and closed the door. Not even when I saw my reflection in the rearview mirror, my lipstick still perfect, eyes dry, gaze steady. The Jaguar I had gifted my father, the one now parked in front like a trophy, was mine again. That had never been more obvious. I hit the start button. The engine hummed to life. I adjusted the seat, reversed, and as I pulled away from the hotel, I saw it. Figures gathering at the windows of the ballroom. Faces blurred by the glass. Movement, pointing. One silhouette broke away and rushed outside. My father. He stopped at the top of the hotel steps, hands on his hips, watching, not yelling, not running toward me, just staring as though trying to calculate what this would cost him. Reputation, legacy, nothing at all. I didn't care anymore. I wasn't currency in that system. By the time I reached the end of the drive, my phone began buzzing. One call, then another, then texts. Claire, Ethan, my mother, uncles, cousins. The fallout had begun, just as I knew it would. But I didn't turn back. Instead, I drove. No destination, just movement. City lights spilled across the windshield, blinking in and out like memories. My hand was still steady on the wheel. My body knew, don't stop now, don't sit in it yet. Keep going. When I finally pulled into a small boutique hotel on Beacon Street, it was nearly midnight. The lobby was quiet. The receptionist recognized my name from the online booking I'd made earlier that week, just in case. A room key was handed over with a smile. I nodded, took the elevator, and didn't speak another word until the door clicked shut behind me. The room was minimalist. Crisp white linens, a single painting above the headboard. I placed the clutch on the desk, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally let myself exhale. Then, and only then, I opened the folder again. I read the test results. The phrases were clinical. No paternal match. Probability of biological relationship, 0.00%. It was the same as before, but it felt different now. Before, it was a wound. Now, it was a release. The buzzing resumed. 27 missed calls, more than 30 messages. A few were from extended family, confused, stunned. One from my mother simply said, "I need to talk to you, please." I silenced the phone. I didn't owe anyone my attention tonight. Instead, I opened my laptop, found an old email draft I'd started weeks ago. A letter to a man named David Archer, the man my mother had dated in college, the one whose name she'd never spoken since, the one I suspected might be my biological father. I tracked him down through alumni databases, professional listings. He was a civil engineer now, based in Oregon, married, 2 adult sons. He had no idea I existed. I stared at the draft. My fingers hovered over the keys. Then I closed the laptop. Not yet. The room grew quiet again, save for the hum of the air conditioner. I lay down, fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. The night wasn't over, but I was done trying to explain myself. For the first time in my life, I didn't need an audience. I didn't need applause. I needed rest. Somewhere across the city, the Morgan family was unraveling. I pictured them all, Ethan furious, Claire shaken, my mother hollow with secrets finally dragged into the light, and my father pacing, alone in the house he'd built from cold stone and expectations. Good. They could sit in it. I would sit in the silence instead, the kind I chose. The morning light cut through the sheer curtains like a quiet witness. I woke in the same dress, my body stiff from sleep but my mind strangely alert. No disorientation, no regrets. Just the soft awareness of change, permanent and irreversible. I checked my phone. 42 missed calls, dozens of texts. The top one was from Claire. "Dad is in a rage. He's threatening legal action over the car. Are you okay?" Then Ethan, "You had no right. This is slander. Return the car. Apologize before this gets worse." Then my mother, "Please, can we meet? Alone." I scrolled down past the chaos to a single message from a number I didn't recognize. David Archer, 3 words. "I got your email." I stared at the screen for several seconds. The adrenaline hit me harder than it had the night before. I hadn't sent the email, or so I thought. I opened my laptop. The draft was gone from drafts. Sent, time-stamped 1:42 a.m. There it was, the full message. Everything I hadn't meant to send yet. Or maybe I had. I closed the screen. Too much, too fast. The next few hours passed in fragments. I left the hotel briefly, got coffee from a place around the corner. Black, no sugar. I didn't taste it. I watched people pass. Joggers, couples, delivery drivers. The normalness of their movement made everything inside me feel like fiction. Back in the room, I finally picked one text to answer. My mother's. We met later that day in a quiet cafe near Commonwealth Avenue. She arrived alone, no makeup, her blouse wrinkled, as though she hadn't slept. For the first time in my life, she looked not like the family's image manager, but like a person, a woman. She sat across from me slowly. Her voice, when it came, was low, tired. "I didn't expect it to happen like that." "You didn't expect it to happen at all," I replied. Not with anger, just truth. She nodded. "That's true." We sat in silence for a long while. "I met David before your father," she said eventually. "We were students. It was intense. He wasn't for money. My parents hated him." She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup like it might steady her. "When I got pregnant, they gave me one choice. End it, or marry someone they approved of. I met Richard at a fundraiser 2 weeks later. He proposed by the end of the month." "And you never told him?" I asked. I told him later, when you were a baby. He said it didn't matter, that he would raise you like his own." She looked up at me, and for once there was no calculation in her eyes. "But it always mattered, didn't it?" Her lip trembled. She didn't answer. He treated me like a stranger, I said, for 3 decades. He never touched me with kindness, never once said he was proud, and you stood there and let it happen. She closed her eyes. I thought if I gave him time, he'd come around. I thought if I kept the peace, it would pass. It never did. No, she whispered. It didn't. She reached into her bag, pulled out an old photograph, folded at the edges, 2 college students sitting on a bench, her and a man I didn't recognize. That's David, she said. You have his eyes. I didn't take the photo. I wasn't ready for that. She placed it gently on the table between us. He's a good man. I've watched his life from a distance. He never knew. I wanted to protect him. And you. I could have screamed at her. But the truth is, there was nothing left to break. The shattering had already happened. Now we were just standing in the pieces. What happens now? She asked softly. I don't know, I said, but I'm not going back. She nodded once, slowly, like she'd known that answer before she asked. When we left the cafe, she touched my shoulder. Brief, no performance, just human. Then she turned and walked away. Back in the hotel, I finally opened David's response. It was short. I don't know what to say, but I'm open to talking. I'll be in Boston next week for a conference. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. I read it twice, 3 times, then typed back. I'd like that too. Then I closed the lid on the laptop, leaned back in the chair, and exhaled. There was still fallout happening elsewhere. Angry phone calls, reputation damage, threats. But none of it touched me now. I was somewhere new. David Archer wore glasses. That was the first thing I noticed. Not dramatic ones, just simple black frames that suited his face. He stood when I approached our cafe table, unsure if a handshake or a hug was appropriate. I opted for neither. We both sat. 2 strangers tethered by biology, decades apart, and bound by a single, undeniable truth. You don't have to explain anything, he said gently, before I even opened my mouth. I just want to know who you are now. That disarmed me more than any apology could have. I told him about New York, my work, the firm I'd built. How I learned to walk into boardrooms full of suits who thought I was someone's assistant and leave with the contract signed in my favor. He listened without interrupting. When I paused, he said, "You sound like someone who's never had space to be wrong." That stopped me cold. I haven't, I said. We didn't talk much about the past, only enough to understand where the paths had diverged. He hadn't known. His voice cracked when he said that, not from guilt, but from the kind of grief that arrives late and stays forever. By the time we said goodbye, there was no declaration of family, no forced intimacy, but there was a door open, and for now, that was enough. The following weeks passed quietly. Ethan never contacted me again. His wife sent a single message, something cold and clinical about privacy and reputation. Claire tried once with a voicemail full of tears and regret and helplessness. I didn't return it, but Sophia did call. Often. She and I began speaking almost every night. Not just about the chaos, but about ourselves. Real conversations. Childhood memories filtered through new understanding. She admitted things, times she saw the differences, the favoritism, the silence around me that had always felt strange to her, even as a child. I didn't know how bad it was, she said once. You didn't need to, I replied. You knew enough. She was the only one from that side of the family who visited me in New York. She brought a bottle of wine and no questions. You redecorated, she said, looking around my apartment. I made it mine, I answered. She raised her glass. To starting over, we clinked. Eventually, the Jaguar went back. Not because of threats, but because I didn't want it anymore. It was a relic of something I no longer sought. My lawyer handled it, along with the carefully worded letter that reminded Richard Morgan. DNA isn't defamatory, only facts. The silence from his side remained unbroken. No apology, no explanation, just the same vacuum he had always offered. This time, I didn't try to fill it. Instead, I put my energy elsewhere. My firm expanded. I hired 2 new analysts, spoke at a women's finance conference, flew to Berlin for a client pitch, and walked away with a 7-figure contract. For the first time, my success felt like mine, not something to be used as a battering ram against the doors of approval. My mother reached out every few weeks, carefully, softly, sometimes to share something. A book she read, a memory she'd been too afraid to tell. Sometimes just to say hello. We weren't mending, we were starting fresh. That was harder, but more honest. And David? He called once a week. Sometimes just to ask how my day was. Sometimes to send an article about urban infrastructure he thought I'd like. We weren't building a fantasy. We were acknowledging a truth and letting it unfold. One evening, I stood at my window and looked out at the skyline. Lights flickering in high rises, taxis blurring through intersections. I thought about that night at the hotel, the folder, the silence that followed, and how none of it had broken me. My worth had never lived at that dinner table. It had always been here, in the quiet resilience, the uncelebrated wins, the steady hand that never stopped steering, even when no one else was watching. I didn't need a toast anymore. I had myself, and that finally was enough.